So it has been roughly 11 years since my life kind of fell apart. And I was thinking about it the other day about what my biggest regret from that time period was. And this is going to sound maybe a little weird, but in hindsight, I think what I regret the most is that I really didn't document that time period of my life. I didn't write, I wasn't journaling, I wasn't taking pictures of the van that we decked out. We built this bed and this kitchen in, and that I was living in the back of Oakland running an extension cord from the van into the gym, and that I was showering in there every morning, but I would be woken up at 5 in the morning to CrossFit happening just outside my van. I didn't take pictures, I didn't write about this stuff, and so when I think back on that period, it's a little bit of a gray spot. Like I don't have the firmest memories of what was happening. I'm sure there's so many things that now would have been amazing to have access to, and I just don't have it because I felt so much shame during that period of time. The last thing I wanted to do was document what was happening to me. I didn't want to live it any more than I already was, and yet when I look back now, I wish I had that stuff. I wish I could look back and remember it, and maybe not all of it so fondly, but to be able to recall that time period of my life. And the reason I bring this up is I was scrolling around Twitter the other day, and I saw somebody else, an entrepreneur who had not a similar journey as mine, but like we all have this journey where we start from a place where we, like if you're playing the game right and you're climbing the mountain, you start at the bottom of the mountain. And so we all have that journey, that hero's journey from, the small town villager who goes on to like meet the mentor and get all the cool tools that helps them, become the hero of the story. And it's just really cool to be able to look back on who you were and where you were at those low points of your life so that you can kind of compare it to where you are now. Because again, like one of the things we talk about a lot on this podcast is how it's so easy to focus all of your time and energy on the gap between where you are and where you're trying to go. We're very, performance-oriented creatures. If you're listening to this podcast, you're interested in being the best version of yourself and continually moving towards your greatness and realizing that. And so, of course, it makes sense that your eyes are always on the prize and you're going to the top of the mountain. You're focused on that. But as a result, we can always feel like we're not making progress because no matter how close we get to our goal, we just kind of look past it and we move the goalpost on ourselves. And so that gap between where we are and where we're trying to go, it never actually gets any smaller. We only ever keep it the same distance, maybe even gets bigger on ourselves. And yet the gap between where we are now and where we started, that gap is always increasing. It's always improving, ideally, if you're doing it right and you're moving forward. If you're not, then, maybe it'll shrink. Maybe you look and you'll realize, oh, I used to be way up there, now I'm not. That can be its own form of motivation. But when we take the time to look back on where we started versus where we are now, like we can find a lot of gratitude, a lot of fulfillment, and a lot of sense of progress. And a lot of times in life, we don't get that big dopamine rush of feeling like I'm making progress, because truth is success is a grind, a daily grind of small activities that don't really feel like very much, but over time they compound to become something very big and meaningful. But it can be hard to see in the moment, which is why I think it's very important to journal, to write, and to put down on paper or document in some kind of meaningful way who you were and where you were on the journey, so that you can look back on it and see the difference between who you are now and who you were then. And I'm so grateful that I did, in fact, start writing in about 2014. That's when I started writing, my science fiction and fantasy. I started a blog, and just being able to look back on that period and who I was as a writer, what things I was interested in, how I communicated my thoughts versus now. It's this wonderful prize, this gift that you can give your future self by documenting where you are in the journey and what you're feeling, who you are, what you're thinking in this moment, so that future you 20, 50, 30, those are weird numbers, 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road can look back and be like, I totally forgot that I used to care about this, or look how far I've come. I used to communicate like an idiot or whatever, like a baboon. Anyways. I share this because I saw another guy who was sharing his journey, and he did a much better job of documenting these things. And so he had these little things that had meant a lot to him in the moment that I just never thought to document. And I'm like, man, I wish I had those things, because I know they were there. I just don't have them anymore. I threw them away. Like a lot of times when you're at that low point, you're not quite yet the hero of the story and you know it, you're kind of ashamed of it and you don't want anybody to pay attention, much less future you to be paying attention. And you don't want to dwell on it by writing about it. And so you don't. And I just want to share this because there's a very high likelihood that you will look back later on in life and regret not having documented the journey more thoroughly. So regardless of where you are right now, if you're just starting off, you're halfway up the mountain, you're further up the mountain, like wherever you are in like your own journey, I just encourage you to start documenting it more thoroughly. If not for your own sake, maybe for your family's sake, for your loved ones, people will come in the future. There's just so much power in it, and I don't think you'll regret it. So regardless of where you are on the journey, document it. And that's today's lesson, guys. I appreciate you being here as always. Thank you. And I'll catch you tomorrow. But until then, stay hyper-focused, my friends.